Good day, my friends. It's me again, your Menopause Tailor. This is tutorial number 108. Now, usually I present principles for helping you to manage your menopause your way. But today I'm going to present something more general in nature. We're talking about processed foods and natural products. You see, I address dilemmas with you quite often, and this is a dilemma. Here's the big question. Why would anyone focus on using natural products when they're routinely consuming processed foods? Things like that just baffle me. I mean, if you're going to be conscientious about being as healthy as you can be, don't you think that you should start with what you put in your mouth? It's so common for women to talk about avoiding xenoestrogens, which we talked about in the last tutorial, at the same time that they're chomping down on processed food. So I'm just going to put some of that into perspective for you today. First, let's define a few words. Let's start with the word unprocessed. Unprocessed food is food that has nothing bad added and nothing good removed. In other words, it's in its original form. And that brings us to the definition of the word processed. Processed food is food that has something added or removed that lowers its nutritional value. Based on these definitions, you'd assume that all unprocessed foods are healthier than processed foods, right? Do you remember way back in tutorial 22 when we dissected the terms natural and synthetic? You learned that those words were not as black and white as you once thought. Could the same be true of the words processed and unprocessed? Is it possible for a processed food to be healthier than an unprocessed food? Let's look at some examples. Have you ever thought about the word refined? You know me, I think about everything. In the general sense, the word refined means improved or more elegant, but not when it comes to food. Refined grains are stripped of their natural color by polishing them. So ironically, refined grains are actually processed, and non-refined grains aren't. Whole grains are the good grains, and refined grains are the bad grains. So they're backwards. And then, to compensate for removing the nutritious parts of the grain, the stripped refined grains are fortified with vitamins. It's really quite oxymoronish, if you ask me. Why not just leave the natural grain alone with all its vitamins intact and save all that time and money it takes to remove the nutritious stuff and then add it back in? It's backward situations like this that give me ideas for tutorials sometimes, and that's how I got the idea for this tutorial. We have all sorts of healthy, natural foods, but we utilize them to make a bunch of processed junk foods. Not only do we have processed foods, but we have ultra-processed foods. Those are the ones that have no nutritional value whatsoever. They resemble nothing that grows from the earth. They're completely of chemical origin. And they even have junk added to the chemicals. These fall into two categories: ultra-processed plant foods and processed animal foods. So examples would be Bacos, meats with phosphate additives like mostly chicken, sweet foods, salty foods, and soft drinks. And then we try to erase some of the junkiness in some foods by making sure they're organic. That's a term that really gets misconstrued. So what's the true definition of organic? In general terms, organic really means many things that have absolutely nothing to do with food or agriculture. So here are a few definitions of the word organic. It means having to do with an organ. It means inherent. It means organized. It means containing carbon. It means derived from living organisms. It means fundamental. And it means necessarily related to something. So how is it that we use the word organic to insinuate that something is grown or farmed in a healthier or safer manner? And if the word we use to designate a healthier, safer option is inaccurate, just how much healthier and safer are the actual products that are labeled organic? You know me, I'm always asking these kinds of questions. I take nothing for granted. Well, here are some facts about organic foods. Most people use the word organic as defined by the U.S. Department of Agriculture to mean that the farming practices preserve the environment and avoid use of synthetic substances such as pesticides and antibiotics. But does that mean that organic food is healthier than non-organic food? Did you know that there are organic jelly beans and organic Oreos? Does the fact that they're organic mean that they're not junk food? Isn't junk food regardless of whether or not it's organic? Is it better to eat organic jelly beans instead of eating non-organic fruits and vegetables? Does organic produce actually have more nutritional value than non-organic produce? Are you better off buying organic food that costs twice as much as non-organic food? Or are you better off buying all plant-based foods and saving money by forfeiting all animal-based foods? So maybe you believe that the absence of pesticides is what makes organic produce safer. But just how much safer are organic pesticide-free foods than other options? Do you think pesticides are as dangerous as cigarettes? Could your reluctance to buy non-organic produce result in a lower consumption of all fruits and vegetables? If so, what's more dangerous? Omitting fruits and vegetables from your diet, or eating them even if they harbor some pesticides? Do you notice that I fire questions at you without giving you the answers? My goal is to make you think about these things and decide for yourself. I've realized that most people don't question things. So I like to pose the questions for you and let you consider the questions and answer them. Okay, so far we have a situation in which we forfeit eating the truly natural, unprocessed foods and instead eat a bunch of processed junk foods. But the purpose of this tutorial is to contrast that behavior with another behavior. And that's our tendency to focus on xenoestrogens in our environment. And you learned in the last tutorial that xenoestrogens include the hidden estrogens in chemical products, in industrial products, in cosmetic products, in agricultural products. Last week I taught you that one of the xenoestrogens is a hormonal growth enhancer for livestock. That means you ingest it every time you eat meat. So, do you still eat meat? Another one comes in beverage containers. Are you more worried about drinking from a plastic water bottle than you are about eating meat? And then there are the xenoestrogens in household cleaning products. Do you think you get more exposure to xenoestrogens in your furniture polish or in your food? What about cosmetics? How much makeup, nail polish, soap, and perfume do you use? Does it constitute more xenoestrogens in those products than the junk you consume in junk food? What I'm getting at here is priorities. We tend to want to have our meat and eat it too, if you will. If we really want to decrease our exposure to bad things in our environment, it should start with what we eat. But that's not what most people do. They eat all the processed and animal junk foods without a single thought, and then worry about the xenoestrogens in the environment, some of which are impossible to avoid. I think we should reconsider our priorities. First, put your diet in order. Eat as nutritiously as you can. Get rid of the ultra-processed, refined, and animal products. You'll be way ahead of the game just by doing that. And then, if you're still concerned about your exposure to environmental toxins, focus on all the other things. Doing it the other way around just, it seems very backward. Sometimes these lessons I give you bring back distant memories for me. It's like this light bulb goes off in my head, and I think it reminds me of the time. So here's a little story about priorities from my high school days. You see, I was a nerd in high school. All right, I was a nerd long before high school. I still am. And back in high school, all I cared about was school. So I wasn't the kind of kid who partied or stayed out late or anything like that. No, I was in bed by 8:30 or 9 p.m. Still am. Well, actually now I'm in bed more like 8 o'clock. And weekends have never meant much to me. I consider every night a school night. But one Saturday night in high school, my friend Tammy and I decided to go to a movie. And to be really wild, we went to a drive-in movie. We thought we were really cool. We were 16. We were both straight-A students on the honor roll, in the National Honor Society, in the choir, etc. So we went to the big drive-in theater after dark. And the movie didn't finish until 9 p.m. That's way past our bedtimes. And not only that, I drove my mom's Dodge Dart. Boy, did we feel grown up, and even a little risque. So we drove to the drive-in, watched the movie, and then headed back home. And the movie theater was on a big multi-lane road called Montana Boulevard. It had 3 lanes going in each direction. Imagine that, 3 lanes each way. I felt like such a big shot driving on Montana Boulevard. Of course, I stayed on the far inside lane and made sure to drive well under the speed limit. I couldn't imagine even going over 40 miles per hour. So I was very focused, concentrating on driving with great care. Now, along Montana Boulevard, there were various businesses. There was a mattress store, some restaurants, and a place called the Lamplighter Lounge. I'd never been to the Lamplighter Lounge. Heck, the mere fact that the name had the word lounge in it was enough to keep me from ever going near it. I'd never been to any kind of bar before. Come to think of it, I've still never been to any kind of bar. Anyway, the Lamplighter Lounge was on the same side of the street that we were on, but it was 2 lanes away, off to our right. I didn't even dare look in the direction of the Lamplighter Lounge as I drove past it. But just as I got to the part of Montana Boulevard directly in front of the Lamplighter Lounge, a big white pickup truck suddenly darted right in front of my mom's Dodge Dart. In a split second, the entire hood of the car was under the truck. It seemed like the truck had come out of nowhere. And I think I was in shock because I don't recall much from that moment on. I mean, not only did the Dodge Dart come to an abrupt, crunching stop, but the driver of the pickup truck flew out of his truck and onto the pavement beside us. I mean, talk about a goody two-shoes nerd freaking out. I was completely mortified. But apparently Tammy was more with it than I. She started yelling, "His pants are down! His pants are down!" And that brought me out of my stupor. Not only were Tammy and I both virgins, neither one of us had ever seen an adult penis. And I guess you could say that we had our priorities a bit mixed up because we had just had a potentially life-threatening wreck. But neither one of us focused on anything but that big penis. I mean, it was erect, you see. That's right. The guy sustained an ejection with an erection. He was pretty surprised by the whole thing, too. I mean, maybe erections make a guy more resilient to injury. I don't know. But he jumped up off the pavement and started pulling up his pants. And that's when we saw a woman raise her head from the front seat of his pickup truck. He had picked her up in the Lamplighter Lounge, and she had proceeded to provide oral sexual services while he was driving. And in his excitement, he had pressed on his accelerator and caused his pickup to pick up speed and dart out across 3 lanes of traffic into the hood of my mom's Dodge Dart. Obviously, he had his priorities screwed up. Turns out he didn't have a driver's license either. Priorities. Boy, was he in trouble when the cops arrived. As for Tammy and me, our greatest trauma came from seeing his erect penis. Yeah, I was pretty freaked out about his ejection from the truck, but I was more freaked out about his erection. I still have no recollection as to what my mom's Dodge Dart looked like trapped under his truck. You see, mixed up priorities come in many forms. Your job is to recognize these mixed up priorities when you still have an opportunity to right them. If I had the same accident today, I guarantee you I'd pay no attention whatsoever to the guy's erection. Nada. But back then my priorities were screwed up. So don't be like the erect, ejected truck driver who had his priorities all screwed up. If you're going to care about doing what's good for you, start with what you put in your mouth. Don't put processed foods into your body while avoiding all the toxic products from the environment that have minimal harmful effects. First things first, cleaning up your diet comes first. Okay, so that sums up my thoughts for the day. Start looking at your habits and see if what I've said today hits home. And remember, the choices are all yours. Regardless of what you notice about your priorities, you can still do things your way, and I'll help you tailor things accordingly. I'll see you in a week. In the meantime, follow me on social media, subscribe to my channel. I'll see you then.